Have you ever felt like your life was meant for something more, but you just didn't know where to begin? Maybe you've tried to change before. You made a plan, felt excited, but then life got in the way. You got tired, you lost focus, and once again, you found yourself stuck in the same place, the same habits, the same thoughts, the same results. You're not alone. In this story, you'll follow a personal journey, not of someone perfect or superhuman, but of someone just like you. Someone who struggled, stumbled, and questioned everything. Until one day, something clicked, a spark was lit, and from that moment, a powerful transformation began. This isn't just a motivational story. It's a blueprint for change. Each chapter reveals a lesson, deep, powerful, and unforgettable. Lessons that don't just inspire you, but challenge you. Lessons that show you how to take control of your time, your mindset, and your future. And the best part? These lessons aren't based on luck or talent. They're based on consistency, clarity, and choice. Whether you're learning English, building a new habit, or trying to change your life direction, this story is for you. Because the truth is, you don't need a perfect plan. You need a powerful reason. You need to start, to act, to keep going, even when nobody is watching. So here's a question for you. What's one lesson you've learned that changed your life forever? Leave a comment below. I read every single one. And stay with me until the end, because by the time we reach chapter 12, you'll not only see how the story ends, you might see how your own story can begin again, with strength, with purpose, with real change. This is 10 lessons that will change your life forever. You're watching Read and Learn English, the place where stories teach, inspire, and help you grow in language and in life. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Call to Awaken. For a long time, I didn't realize something was wrong. My life looked fine from the outside. I had routines. I had responsibilities. I had a screen in front of me and a calendar full of tasks. But deep down, I felt empty. It wasn't a loud kind of pain. It was quiet, dull, and constant, like a whisper I kept ignoring. I wasn't failing, but I wasn't growing. I wasn't unhappy, but I wasn't truly alive either. I was just existing. Days blurred together. I woke up, went to work, came home, watched something mindless, scrolled through social media, and went to sleep. I thought this was normal. Everyone around me seemed tired, distracted, and always waiting for the weekend. So I told myself it was okay to settle. Then one day, everything changed, but not in the way I expected. It wasn't a big moment. It was something small. I was searching through my phone, looking for a file, when I stumbled on an old video. In the video, I was talking about my goals. I looked younger, but what struck me most was how passionate I sounded. I had energy in my voice and fire in my eyes. I watched it again, and something inside me twisted. That version of me had dreams. That version believed in possibilities. I looked at my current self and felt like a stranger. That was my first mirror. The moment I truly saw how far I had drifted from who I once wanted to become. A few days later, I had coffee with someone I admired. I shared some of my thoughts, how I felt lost, unmotivated, unsure. They listened quietly, then said something simple but powerful. Comfort zones are dangerous. They feel safe, but they kill your potential. Those words hit me like lightning. I went home and wrote them down. That was my reminder. the second nudge from life that something needed to change. Soon after, I ran into someone I hadn't seen in years. They looked worn out, like life had slowly drained them. We talked briefly, and everything about their energy felt heavy. Later that night, I realized something terrifying. I was on that same path, not because of some big failure, but because I was doing nothing to grow. That moment became my warning, the third message I couldn't ignore. A mirror, a reminder, a warning, 3 signs, back to back. I knew I couldn't go on like before. Something had to shift. I didn't know exactly what to do, but I knew I had to wake up. So I sat down with a notebook and wrote one sentence. I refuse to live on autopilot. That became my new truth. I didn't need a grand plan. I just needed to take ownership of my life again. At first, it was scary. I realized how much I'd been running from discomfort, choosing easy distractions over meaningful effort. But that awareness was the key. Real change begins when you tell yourself the truth. I had to admit that I wasn't doing my best. I wasn't living with purpose. And I had to accept that no one else was going to fix that for me. It had to start with me. I began paying attention. I started noticing my habits, how I reached for my phone when I felt bored, how I avoided doing hard things, how I made excuses instead of progress. I didn't try to change everything overnight. I just watched. I listened. I learned. I read books about mindset. I listened to podcasts about personal growth. I started writing my thoughts at the end of each day, trying to understand what I really wanted out of life. The more I reflected, the more I understood something important. I didn't need more motivation. I needed consistency. Motivation comes and goes. But if I could do one small thing every day, just one thing that moved me closer to my goals, I could build something powerful. That thought was the beginning of a new mindset. Not one based on instant results, but one built on long-term vision. I also began talking less about my dreams and doing more. I stopped waiting for the perfect time. I stopped trying to feel ready. I realized that action creates clarity. Every small step gave me more strength, more understanding. I started showing up for myself in ways I hadn't in years. I wasn't perfect. I made mistakes, but I kept going. The call to awaken doesn't always sound like a roar. Sometimes it's a whisper, a quiet feeling that you're meant for more. If you listen closely, it gets louder. And if you follow it, it will take you somewhere new. That's what I did. I stopped hiding from myself. I stopped numbing the discomfort. I chose to feel it fully, because I knew it was leading me to growth. Looking back, I'm thankful for that video, that conversation, that old friend. Each of them pushed me out of my sleep and into awareness. Awareness gave me choice, and choice gave me power. I didn't need to transform overnight. I just needed to begin, with honesty, courage, and one small decision. This was my first lesson. You cannot build a new life while living the old one on repeat. You must wake up. You must ask hard questions. You must look in the mirror and decide whether the person you see is who you truly want to be. For me, that answer was no. And so, I began again. Chapter 2. The 1% Mindset, Beyond the Ordinary. After that awakening, something inside me shifted. It wasn't a loud transformation. There was no sudden burst of energy or a dramatic new routine. It started in my thoughts. I began to question what kind of life I had been building. and more importantly, why I had been building it. For so long, my actions were shaped by outside approval. I wanted likes on social media, compliments from friends, recognition at work, but none of that ever filled the emptiness inside. The praise was temporary, the applause faded quickly, and I was left right where I began, unsure, stagnant, and frustrated. That realization made me rethink everything. Why was I working so hard to please people who didn't even truly know me? Why was I chasing validation instead of value? I had spent too much time trying to look successful instead of actually becoming someone I respected. I started to understand a truth that most people avoid. Greatness doesn't come from what others see. It comes from what you do when no one is watching. This was when I discovered the power of the 1% mindset. It's not flashy, it's not exciting, but it's real. The 1% mindset is about choosing relentless improvement every single day, no matter how small the progress, no matter who's watching, and no matter how you feel. It's the quiet commitment to do better, to push further, to go deeper even when there's no immediate reward. Most people want results fast. They want praise now. They want to skip the grind. But the 1% mindset says, show up, even when no one claps. I started applying this to my life. Instead of aiming for big wins, I aimed to improve by just 1% every day. If I couldn't write for an hour, I'd write for 10 minutes. If I couldn't read a full chapter, I'd read a page. If I felt too tired to work out, I'd just do 5 push-ups. These actions seemed small, almost meaningless, but I did them anyway. Day after day, no shortcuts, no excuses, and that was the breakthrough. I began to feel different, not because I had achieved something huge, but because I was finally doing things for myself. This wasn't about proving anything to anyone anymore. It was about proving something to myself, that I could be disciplined, that I could be consistent, that I could build trust with the person in the mirror. And slowly, that trust grew. I began to respect my own effort, even when no one else noticed. That inner respect became fuel. I didn't need validation to keep going. The process itself became the reward. I also became more selective with my time and attention. I stopped chasing trends. I stopped comparing my progress to others. I started asking better questions. Did I grow today? Did I challenge myself? Did I act with intention? If I could say yes, I felt peace. That peace was worth more than any like or compliment. It came from within, and no one could take it away. Of course, some days were harder than others. The voice of doubt still visited me. It whispered things like, "You're not doing enough," or "This isn't working." But I kept going, because I had learned something powerful. Doubt is not a sign to stop. It's a signal that you're stepping into growth. And the only way to quiet that voice is with consistent action. Show up again, move forward again. That's how you win. The 1% mindset taught me to fall in love with the process. Not the finish line, not the outcome. Just the act of showing up and doing the work. It's not glamorous. You don't get medals for it. But day by day, it changes you. It sharpens your mind. It strengthens your will. It builds an identity that says, I am someone who doesn't give up. I began noticing something else, too. When I focused on process over praise, I actually became more productive. I wasn't wasting energy on what others thought. I wasn't paralyzed by fear of failure. I just did the next small thing, and then the next. And those small things added up. The results came, not from chasing them, but from honoring the work. That's the irony. When you stop needing results so badly and start respecting the daily grind, the results often follow. But even if they don't come quickly, you still grow, you still win, because you're becoming stronger, wiser, more capable. You're becoming someone who acts with purpose, not someone who waits for motivation. The world is loud with opinions and pressure. Everyone has a voice, a comment, a judgment, but the 1% mindset teaches you to go quiet, to tune out the noise, to focus on what you can control, your attitude, your habits, your choices. It teaches you that your life is your responsibility. No one is coming to save you. No one is going to hand you the life you dream of. You have to build it, slowly and patiently, one step at a time. And that's what I was doing, not to impress anyone, not to post about it, but because I finally understood that the only thing standing between the life I had and the life I wanted was consistent action, small, daily, intentional. That's it. That's the secret. This was no longer just a motivational idea. It became a way of life, a quiet revolution inside me. I had spent years waiting for clarity, for energy, for luck. But now I knew clarity comes through action. Energy grows with effort. And luck? Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity, and preparation starts today. So I committed, not to perfection, not to results, but to process. I started becoming the type of person who doesn't need to be seen to stay strong, who doesn't need applause to keep showing up, who doesn't chase quick wins but builds slow and steady victories, one decision at a time. This is the 1% mindset. It's not about doing everything. It's about doing something real, something small, every single day. That's how ordinary becomes extraordinary, and I was just getting started. Chapter 3. Every thread counts, the fabric of fate. The deeper I went on this journey, the clearer it became. My life was not built by big moments. It wasn't shaped by the rare, dramatic changes or the once-in-a-lifetime opportunities. It was built by the small, seemingly insignificant decisions I made every single day. The way I started my mornings, the thoughts I chose to believe, the conversations I avoided, the habits I repeated when no one was watching. These were the threads, and together they were weaving the fabric of my fate. Before, I used to wait for big breaks or magical turning points. I believed success came from a lucky chance or a powerful burst of motivation, but I had it all wrong. The truth is far more ordinary and far more powerful. The life we live today is simply a reflection of the choices we made yesterday. And if we want a different future, we need to start by making different choices now. At first, it was overwhelming to accept. The idea that I was responsible for the tiny details of my life felt like pressure. But with time, I saw it as freedom. If my future depended on small decisions, that meant I didn't have to wait for permission or a miracle. I just had to be intentional. I just had to choose well, again and again. Each moment became a chance to steer the course of my destiny. I started paying attention to the patterns in my life, the habits I had built without even realizing it. The way I reached for my phone first thing in the morning, the way I postponed important tasks just because they felt uncomfortable, the way I gave in to laziness with excuses like, "I'll start tomorrow." These weren't just habits, they were votes. Each choice was a vote for the kind of person I was becoming. That insight changed everything. Suddenly, brushing my teeth on time, stretching for 10 minutes, journaling before bed, or turning off distractions during work, none of it felt small anymore. It felt like I was casting votes for my future self. Was I building someone strong, focused, and self-respecting? Or was I building someone who gave up easily, who let their days slip by without meaning? I understood then that consistency wasn't just about achieving goals. It was about identity. Every repeated action was a quiet statement to myself. This is who I am. And if I kept repeating actions that aligned with my values, eventually those values would become second nature. I wouldn't need to force discipline. I would simply become disciplined. I wouldn't need to fake confidence. I would earn it through proof of my own behavior. That's when I began to treat each day like a thread, thin, delicate, and easy to ignore on its own, but powerful when woven together with purpose. If I neglected a thread, the pattern could unravel. If I cared for it, even gently, it would strengthen the entire design. I no longer judged days by their size or excitement. I judged them by their direction. Was I moving forward, even a little, or slipping backward? This shift gave me incredible peace. I stopped chasing perfection. I stopped trying to fix my whole life in one day. I learned to value progress over performance, effort over ego, because I realized that fate wasn't something I stumbled upon. It was something I built, stitch by stitch, choice by choice. Of course, I wasn't perfect. I still made mistakes. I still had lazy days. But instead of letting that break me, I used it as a reminder. One weak thread doesn't destroy the whole fabric unless I give up entirely. One mistake wasn't failure. It was a chance to begin again. With that understanding, I became less afraid of setbacks and more focused on returning to alignment. I started applying this mindset to every part of my life, my relationships, my health, my learning, my dreams. I asked myself constantly, what small action today will strengthen the thread of the life I want? Sometimes it was sending a message to a friend I hadn't spoken to. Sometimes it was going for a short walk. Sometimes it was studying a new word in English, or listening to 5 minutes of an inspiring podcast. These weren't huge wins, but they mattered. They were proof that I was showing up for my future. One of the most powerful lessons I learned in this chapter of my journey was that consistency beats intensity. Anyone can push hard for one day. Anyone can be motivated once in a while. But the person who shows up every day, even quietly, will always outlast the one who depends on bursts of energy. That's why I started trusting small steps more than big plans. Because I could control them, I could repeat them, and over time, they became the strongest part of me. As the days passed, I began to feel a deep sense of pride, not from what others said, but from what I knew to be true. I was no longer a passive participant in my life. I was a weaver, carefully shaping my future with each decision. I was building something real, something lasting. And that feeling, that quiet confidence, was more satisfying than any external reward. Looking back now, I can see how far I've come. Not because of one big moment, but because I started to believe that every thread counts, that each small action matters, that our destiny isn't written by chance or by others, it's written by us, through the tiny, invisible choices we make every single day. And that belief, it changes everything. Chapter 4. The Unburdening. Owning Your World. There comes a moment in every journey when the mirror no longer lies. When all the excuses, all the blame, all the pointing fingers start to feel hollow. I reach that point quietly. No dramatic event, no grand awakening, just a slow, undeniable realization. If I kept waiting for someone else to fix my life, I would be waiting forever. It was time to take ownership, full ownership. For years, I had unknowingly carried the weight of blame. I blamed circumstances. I blamed people. I blamed timing. If I failed to stay consistent, I would say I was too busy, too tired, too unlucky. If I missed a goal, I would explain it away. I didn't have support. Life got in the way. I wasn't born for this. It felt easier that way, comforting, even. Because as long as something outside me was responsible, I didn't have to change. I didn't have to face the discomfort of accountability. But I started to see the damage that mindset had done. Blame had stolen my power. It had convinced me that I was a victim of my life, not the creator of it. That realization hit me hard, and with it came the uncomfortable truth. Everything I hated about my current reality had, in some way, been allowed by me. Maybe not caused by me directly, but allowed, ignored, repeated. That's when the unburdening began. It started with one powerful declaration. This is my life. No one else is coming to save me. Not my parents, not society, not some magical version of the future, just me. That shift in thinking was like tearing off old armor made of complaints, justifications, and denial. At first, I felt exposed, naked, but then I felt strong. Because when you own your life fully, you stop waiting and start building. I took a hard look at my habits. Not the obvious ones like brushing my teeth or checking my phone, but the deeper ones, the ones that shaped my mindset. The habit of snoozing my alarm, the habit of overthinking, the habit of saying yes to distractions and later to growth. These small choices weren't neutral. They were votes, once again, for the life I was living. And if I wanted a better life, I had to cast better votes. So I started changing. Slowly, deliberately. I replaced blame with reflection. Instead of saying, "Why does this always happen to me?" I asked, "What did I allow that led here?" Instead of thinking, "They don't support me," I asked, "Have I been showing up fully for myself?" This shift wasn't easy. My ego resisted. It wanted to be right. It wanted to stay safe. But I knew that growth required honesty. Brutal, healing honesty. Time became my most valuable asset. I no longer saw it as something to spend. I saw it as something to master. I began tracking my hours, noticing where they leaked away. The mindless scrolling, the half-focused conversations, the energy wasted on worry. I cut those leaks, not perfectly, but intentionally. I started scheduling my days, not with rigid plans, but with clarity. I gave time to what mattered, and I protected it fiercely. Owning my world also meant taking responsibility for my energy. I used to think I needed motivation to act. Now I realized I needed action to spark motivation. So even on days when I didn't feel like it, I started just 10 minutes, just one step. And most of the time, once I began, the energy followed. That was one of the most empowering discoveries I made. I didn't have to feel ready to begin. I just had to begin. There were still moments of doubt, times when I slipped, when old patterns called me back. But I didn't shame myself. I reminded myself, This is what ownership looks like. Not perfection, but commitment. I learned to course correct faster, to forgive myself without losing momentum, to move on with grace. Taking control also meant setting boundaries. With others, yes, but more importantly, with myself. I stopped